Brilliant. Thank you very much. And I love getting Simon here because he doesn't like to think he's in the business jet market, but we do it every year to force him. We're now delighted to stick with a similar topic, but looking at charter. We're delighted to have Richard Mumford, the chairman of the Baltic Air Charter Association. For those of you who are not familiar, it is not the Air Charter Association just for the Baltic region, but it goes back to the Baltic shipping market. So if that panel would like to come up now. Very good. I couldn't see you, Richard. Great, yeah. Yeah, hiding in plain sight.
Well, good afternoon, everyone. We're not quite at the last session of the day, but anyone who's been involved in air charter will know that military wargaming is very similar to air charter broking. So we should flow seamlessly through to the last session. The more astute among you will notice I'm not actually Dave Edwards, who was originally down to handle this session. He's the first ever CEO of BACA, and I'm afraid you're going to have to make do with me. I'm the chairman, and by day I masquerade as an aviation lawyer. But you don't want to hear from me. So let's start by working our way down the panel. If you'd like to introduce yourselves and just say a little bit about what your business does and your market space, that would be really interesting.
Adam Twidell from PrivateFly. My platform used to book flights with Synergy Aviation. We might be looking at that after this.
Hello, Paul Touw from Stellar Labs, founder of Stellar Labs. We are working with Rockwell Collins to rebuild actually a flight management, flight operations, marketplace, revenue management platform for the industry, and very much looking forward to the questions of the panel.
I'm Chris Leach. I'm the founder of Air Charter Service. We charter airplanes.
Philippe Fragniere from Exklusiv Aviation. We work as commercial agent for operators, and we're active since many years on the charter market.
I'm Mark Briffa. I'm a Chief Executive Air Partner. We charter aircraft, and we're also a training and safety consultancy business as well.
I'm Wagas Ali, CEO of JetClass. We offer seats on private jets and operate like an airline, and we even distribute the seats like any other airline, allowing the customers to book the seats through any online travel agency, through the GDS systems, through travel agents, and so on.
Thank you very much. Right, so we've got some topics that were put into the program for us. And the first of those is about scalability and why it's so hard for brokers to scale up their business. But I'm going to ask the panel that in a slightly different way. We've seen a lot of new entrants into the market over the past 5 years, the so-called disruptors who've attempted to use technology to deliver a service that's potentially globally exploitable with an efficient structure. We've seen a number of these business models come into the market with varying success. Certainly seen massive investment into the market, not maybe quite so much in the terms of return on that investment so far. On the panel today, we've got 3 of the innovators in Stellar Labs, PrivateFly and JetClass, and 2 of our major traditional brokers. I'm sure they're going to pull me up for using that terminology. I don't think it's controversial to say that in general terms, there's a move in the market to do more for less, and margins get squeezed, and your ability to do things in the old way for the old margins has become more difficult. But the question really will be, has anyone yet come up with a whole solution, a technology platform that will do away with the traditional broker? For me, it's too simplistic, because if you look at many of the disruptive technologies, behind them sit brokers, and their businesses are really broking businesses that harness technology. And the same with the so-called traditional brokers. You know, these guys aren't Luddites standing on the street corner with pitchforks and smashing up computers. They embrace technology and the tools that technology provide as well. So the secret probably lies in who can marry these approaches to produce a properly scalable and unassailably efficient business model. So my question is this: I wonder the extent to which anyone has yet found that perfect business model for the next 5 years, and if so, whether it really offers the opportunity for someone to exploit it and really stamp their presence on the global charter market. Alternatively, it's just still a people business, and so one that is limited by the ability of individuals to control productive client relationships. So Adam, you're sitting next to me, I'll start with you.
Thanks. Well, I think technology never stands still. And so if you think you've got the recipe and you lock it down, you're going to be challenged. And technology is constantly evolving. So nobody, I don't think, is near to the perfect model. We have a huge amount of respect for the traditional players, Air Partner and Air Charter Service, and they've done an amazing job over many, many years. New entrants, PrivateFly is now 10 years old, so I don't know if we're new anymore, but we've pumped a lot of money in to try and smooth the process. And we focus on what the customer wants. And we sell a flight. If we were selling the same flight as Air Partner or Air Charter Service within the same aircraft, we've got 3 reasons why we would sell that flight, assuming it's the same aircraft as everybody else is selling. One is speed, then price, and then customer service. And our technology and our investment in the technology helps with all 3 of those.
Thank you. And Paul?
Well, I think it's sort of interesting if you look at other markets like the commercial airline market, how that grew and adopted technology. I'm sure you're all familiar with Amadeus and Sabre, where the airlines need an outlet and they need a distribution channel. So our system is much more analogous to the commercial airline system and how that's evolved. Brokers may actually tap into Sabre or Amadeus or any of the different systems out there. And the 2 are not mutually exclusive. There are many brokers in the commercial airline industry that survive very well. American Express is one of the largest. And I think going forward, the very good brokers will actually take advantage of technology and do very well on it, being able to offer their customers much better customer service. And maybe some of the lower end clients will go directly online and book directly. But those customers that require higher hand-holding corporations and so forth will tap into systems like ours that are utilized by most of the operators in the market, and they can find lots of supply and lots of availability of charter automatically. And that's really what we're focused on.
Well, okay, it says there, why is it so hard for brokers to scale? And yes, it's very hard. And it is a mixture of customer service and investment in technology. We found scaling very hard over the last 27 years. And part of our scaling was a kind of fake scaling. It was linear. There were metrics we saw from the accounts of our partner and Chapman Freeborn, the existing brokerage houses when we started. And those metrics were £1 million per employee, generating about 10% margin, £100,000, and that pays a broker and the rent and the travel and the marketing and what have you. Another metric was that you needed about 2 customer-facing people putting flights together could just about support 1 backroom person. Now, we took those metrics that we saw in the accounts of the major operators, major brokers at that time, and we applied them, and we grew in a linear fashion, meaning lots of little amoeba cells applying the same metrics around the world. And then technology has enabled us to break out into what economists would really call an economy of scale. And that technology is not yet visible at the front end to the customer, because if you take British Airways customer portal, whatever, they had to have an awful lot of back office technology before they permitted the customer to start making seat selection and messing with their loading. And therefore, we approach technology by integrating the customer relationship management system with the inquiries, with the payroll for commission, with the sales performance management of how many inquiries each person handles. So we synthesize the back office in a system we called integrated brokerage operating system. Now, at some point, we can put a front end on that for a customer portal, but it had to be robust enough to allow customer interaction. That has enabled us to get up to £1.4 million per employee. It's let us generate 2.8 worth of customer-facing people, supporting just one back-office person. And so we've only just, in the last bit of growth, from $500 million a year to $700 million a year, we've just managed to harness technology to create what an economist would call a kind of scale. And there's no doubt about it, technology has been instrumental in the true economies of scale. But in terms of traditional versus startup, Richard, I'll just conclude by saying this. You're a lawyer. There are lawyers and accountants, and there's two men above an estate agent practicing law, practicing accountancy, providing an intellectual value-added service between the law, which we all own, or a tax code that we all own, and as well as two men above a shop, there's also little regional accountancy firms and law firms. And then there's scaled-up law firms and accountancy firms providing this intellectual value-added service around the globe to the tune of billions. And my view of the charter broking as an intellectual value-added service to the increasingly complex and diverse business that aviation is, I think there will be room for everything. There'll be room for one-man bands, SMEs, and global corporations. We are obviously hoping to be one of the 4 or 5 global corporations, and I think there's room for everybody, and it's not an either-or situation.
Just before we move on, since it was mentioned I'm a lawyer, we went through this process in the legal market maybe 5 or 6 years ago, where everyone said it was going to be the death of the lawyer, and they were just going to start putting all these contracts online, and people would just download themselves and fill in the blanks. There is a market for that, but actually quite a lot of what we do is quite complex, and some of it requires human interaction and human intelligence that sits behind it. And so what we've had to do instead is to harness technology and tools to perhaps focus the lawyer's time on things that actually need the brain to work, rather than actually sort of admin and things that maybe you end up doing because they need doing. And so I suppose the answer to that, or the questions that you sort of take from that, is whether there's a limit to how much you can replace human intelligence with technology in this market. I don't know, maybe, Philippe, is that an unfair question to put to you?
No, I find it interesting, but I think it's a mix of both. I think everybody is welcome to join this community. Everybody comes with a different standpoint. We are, 500 people in the room, 500 of us have met clients. That means we know that every single client is different. So some people is going to fly with this aircraft or that aircraft. Some people just want a shuttle from A to B, others want very complicated flights. So it's completely, I think each of us, each company in this industry has its strong point and weak point. But in any case, everybody is moving forward. And we move with technology, of course. But we remain, as well, very important is the capability we have to handle those clients. That would be my point.
Okay, thank you. And Mark, Air Partner, one of the brokers has traditionally and certainly a presentation, he attempted to do things in the right way. And when you say you deliver a service, then there's a real service that sits behind it, and you've got your 24-hour ops teams and all these things that sit there and carry a cost. Do you feel that there are therefore limits on your business as to how far you can cut things back and compete with the sort of simpler services that might be offered by platforms?
Not really, Richard. Look, from our perspective, I'll just say some very simple things. It's about the customer. And fundamentally, at the end of the day, you've got to listen to the customer, and you've really got to understand what their needs are. Technology is really important, and technology will form part of a process of what you provide a service to the customer. Not all customers want technology. Some other customers want a concierge-type service. What I've seen today, just in technology as a whole, is the amount of money, the vast amounts of money that's being spent. And one would argue and say there's many, many examples of where technology is being built and being spent. But in actual fact, has anyone bothered to engage with the customer to really, truly try and understand what is the customer's needs? What are their requirements? Because fundamentally, there is a lot of stuff that's out there that potentially they won't even bother using. So from our perspective, it's all about the customer. It's putting the customer first. And fundamentally, it's adding more value to the customer and trying to find that point of difference. And for me, one of the points of difference, there's no question, it is technology. I mean, you can't deny that technology today, you can bury your head in the sand and say, well, just ignore it, it'll go away. It won't go away. The simplicity of the end-to-end process will eventually come around the corner. It's just a case of who's got the deepest pockets to develop it, and it will come. So you just got to position yourself in that position to be the one that potentially can leverage it as and when it happens. The other thing I would say to you as well as our partner, we talk about the value that we bring. As you can see, or people that follow us quite well, we've diversified the business as well at the same time. We've got into the consultancy space and the training space and looked at the regulation side of things. Now, for me, regulation is also really important to the added value, particularly around safety, of where you can make a point of difference with the customer. And again, it's about listening to the customer and recognising their needs.
Thank you. So I'll come to you in a second, Vox. Did you, Adam, you just...
Yeah, I'd just like to come back there, Mark, because to say that we as technology companies haven't listened to our customer, I think is very wrong. And I would like to give you a case study. We had a fantastic presentation earlier on blockchain and a little bit about Bitcoin. In January 2014, on an online review from a customer after they flew with PrivateFly, said everything was fantastic. The only way you could improve your service is to accept Bitcoin. And we investigated it, and we sold our first Bitcoin flight in the first month of 2014. And from there, it was an option for customers to use if they wanted to. We cannot dictate to the modern customer how they interact with us. If they want to use email, if they want to use an app, if they want to use a website, if they like to speak to our customer service team 24 hours a day. Likewise, we can't dictate to the customer how they want to pay. If they want to use Amex, MasterCard, BitPay, Bitcoin, we've listened to our customer throughout the entire process, Mark.
I'm pleased you have.
Okay, thank you. August, you've got a sort of innovative idea that sort of deals with part of the market, and so you're in a slightly interesting space in that sense. But how do you see that sort of technology expanding out into the market?
Yeah, so I mean, our whole business model runs based on artificial intelligence. What we do is we are at the moment scanning the commercial ticket market, like over 3 million tickets, and predicting trends. So that helps us to understand where they're going to be business class demand, on which routes, for what time period. And this helps us then to position our scheduled flights, and then we use and charter those flights from the market to perform those flights. And this gives us the scalability, based on the season, based on the market, how it changes, we can easily adapt and change with it and scale up and down as needed.
Okay, thank you. Right, let's move on to the next question. And we heard in the last session a lot about some of the new operator models in the market. And for me, 2018 is going to be a year in which we're going to see a lot of potential change, a lot of new entrants and ideas coming into the operator market. We've already seen, obviously, Surfair, JetSmarter, you've got Wingly, and various others. And a lot of my broker members often contact me and ask me about these new changes in the market, some of them positive, some of them negative. And we got on here, we've got all the usual subjects about seasonality and corporate reluctance and so on. But I just want to ask a question about how we make sure, as a market and between the brokers and operators and all who participate in it, that we optimize our resources to ensure that every potential customer is educated and enthused to try their first charter experience, and then ideally their second and third. Let's start with Philippe.
Again, I think everybody is doing that, because you have many operators who get requests or recommendations, and as well on their side, maybe they do not have the right aircraft type, the starting point. But still, they try to find what suits the client. It's all about the first contact. Somebody can call an airport, get a recommendation, and then it starts there. Everybody as well, including large and smaller companies, make a lot of marketing efforts to attract clients, and not to only give the idea it's a luxury. I mean, it's a cost-effective way, as we know. The shorter the trip, the most cost-effective it is. So it's an everyday work that goes on for the last, not 2 years or 5 years, but since 20 or 30 years we're doing this.
Okay, thank you. Mark, do do you see any threats to the market that arise out of these new models? I get a lot of complaints as BACA chairman about the sort of wing models and so on, that they are somehow pushing the boundaries of the market. It's interesting what your thoughts are.
Not really. I mean, from my perspective, when you get new entrants into the market, it creates a lot of noise and creates a lot of interest. So for me, it inadvertently, it's promoting the product from the point of view of where they may not wish to choose a Surf Air, but they may go somewhere else. Or you may find them as an entry-level product, but eventually you could transfer them into a more of a mid to medium size or large cabin product eventually. So I see it as an opportunity in the market rather than a threat.
Paul, obviously you see the operator end of the market, perhaps more than some of the other members of the panel.
Yes, you know, it's sort of interesting because a lot of people focus on, when they think of technology, they think of replacing a phone call from a customer to the broker with a technological transaction from a customer to a machine. When in fact, if the broker's really good, the customer calls the broker, there's one phone call, he returns the phone call and says, I have your flight. But behind the scenes, from the broker to the industry and the supplier, there are 10 to 20 phone calls searching for a flight, then 10 to 20 quotes going back. Then once that operator is selected, there are another, they call it the 300 email problem, you know, confirming catering, ground transportation, all those little interactions. So although there may be 1 or 2 phone calls at the front end between the consumer and the industry, on the back end, there are literally 10 to 20 times more interactions between brokers and the operators. And that's where technology is really going to change the industry. Most of the operators do not have systems that can put their availability, their supply, and their prices online. Once you begin to be able to automate that in a collaborative environment and then automate all the different interactions between the broker, the scheduler, the operator, the pilots, back and forth, you know, when there's a flight time change from the customer, that's got to ripple through an entire system of people. So it's the back end where technology is really required. It'll make brokers better. It'll make the online interaction better. So whether the customer wants to go online or deal with a broker, they can do either one, but automating all the back-end transactions all the way through the supply base is sort of a 1 to 10 to 20 times much larger opportunity in automating the industry. And this industry is still really quite offline relative to the hotel industry, the commercial airline industry, even now the ride-hailing and taxi and limo markets, this industry, you really have to fix the back-end problems before you can really put the industry online.
Well, with your business model, how much sort of people time does it take to organize these bookings, the seat bookings on your aircraft?
With us, it's like any other commercial airline. The customers, I mean, it's a ready-made, finished mass product, what we have built, and the customers, they can go on any website like Skyscanner or Kayak and find our flights listed there and just go to a booking like any other commercial airline ticket they would do. Or they could go to their travel agent, and we are already in those GDS systems, which the travel agents use to do the bookings, and just could go in there and do the booking. So this, I mean, we don't have to educate the market much on how to perform the booking and how to get on a private jet and so on. It's very easy for them and quick to jump on one of our flights.
Okay, so I mean, all the traditional broker issues about Wi-Fi and catering and all that sort of thing, how are they dealt with?
So at the moment we kept it very simple, like snacks and soft drinks are included, but later on we intend to give them the options, which like other airlines are also giving like options on what kind of catering they want to take. So this is something we will be adding later on, yes.
Okay, thank you. Adam.
I would just like to go back to the discussion around the disruptors coming into the market. Now, we all agree that nobody's ever bought a private jet if they haven't probably flown on one before, and we all need people to buy aircraft for the sector to survive. But one thing everybody is selling is flights on a regulated AOC aircraft. And I think if you cross over that boundary and allow people to start selling to the general public on non-AOC aircraft, we're entering into a very different and dangerous place. And it would be interesting if there was a representative from an airport. I see Robert Walters from Biggin Hill. Perhaps later you might want to comment about some of the flights from non-regulated aircraft that you would see coming in and out. I mean, if you go to one of these apps, you could fly tonight over the most congested bit of airspace, London, on a Robinson 44 with a pilot who might have 60 hours. Is that safe? Does the passenger understand what they're letting themselves in for? I don't think they do. And so I think there needs to be heavy regulation in Europe to educate the customer about what they're buying. In the States, these websites were shut down very quickly by the FAA, and I don't understand why they're operating in Europe.
Okay, well, thank you for that, Adam. I think the CAA have got some fairly important issues on their plate at the moment, so I think a lot of their resource seems to be directed into one place, which I promised I wasn't going to mention. Chris, have you got anything to add to this particular debate?
No, I think Adam's got a point that compliance, it's broader than an aviation regulatory safety compliance these days. For the globalization of the industry, you have to have APIs to compliance companies acting in the legal sphere to make sure that the lady whose holiday from St. Petersburg to Male isn't the Speaker of the Russian Parliament and a banned person by the American government. You have sanctioned individuals, sanctioned companies, you have sanctioned countries, you have sanctioned routes, you have sanctioned airlines. And as well as aviation safety regulations that Adam refers to, part of our backroom that you're talking about, the back office part of an integrated brokerage operating system, has to be the completion of a touch compliance red alert that covers all aspects of regulatory compliance during the process of the inquiry. And that's part of the back office you've got to get right before, as I say, you can front end it. So I agree with you, back office is the key. The back office productivity is absolutely the key. And to indicate the massive contribution that Adam rightly says that technology is placing on our industry, I remember the first one of our customer-facing agents to book 100 charters in a year, and I created a certificate for him to join a club I called the Century Club. And this year, one agent, through the use of technology in terms of productivity, one agent booked 400 charters. So we've had a quadrupling of productivity through back office automation in our industry, and I think that's going to carry on and become even more effective.
Yeah, all the rules that apply to a flight, we call them flight legality. Every aircraft has different runway performance, the weather changes, but they are finite rules. A computer can learn them and understand them, and within an instant tell you whether any one of hundreds of different rules are being violated, and you don't need a human to do that. So it is definitely the automation of the back office that is going to have a huge impact in being able to provide instantaneous knowledge of whether that aircraft is available, what the right price is, and then being able to scan hundreds or thousands of operators' inventory within a few seconds and know that every single one of those trips is legal, meets all the requirements, the aircraft can meet the performance requirements. A computer can do that in milliseconds. Humans, takes droves and droves of humans to do that, and they make mistakes.
Well, I would agree, but I would still say that we all a small community, we all know each other. You can all advertise, you got 70,000 aircraft all around the world, whatever you want, but we all rely on our knowledge, our contacts, and we all can ask a copy of insurance certificate, a copy of AOC, we can go through the flights asking, a copy of the flight plan, anything possible, yeah. We draw the line as well. We sign as well a chart with the BACA, as you know, the same with different associations. We all stick to AOC aircraft, which is quite the norm, yeah. And if we have a doubt on any situations, like a crew duty or anything, then we question it. And that's how we stay, in the, I would say, within the legislation, yeah. But you will not be able, on one side, you have the technology will help us immensely. There are platforms that came years ago that help us as well for this, yeah. There are new platforms coming in. There is any new form coming every day, which are helpful. And on the other side, we all rely on our knowledge for that. and we rely on the knowledge of our partners. Would it be on the day another broker when we subcontract, for example, for some freight or the parts of the job we don't do, or operators as well, with who we work every day?
Right, okay, I've got one more question, then we'll look at some of these questions of the audience. We're starting to draw towards the end. Probably just quite briefly, many of the areas of aviation have struggled to recruit good young talent over the last few years. We've already heard today about the shortage of pilots, and it's not a problem that's exclusive to the corporate aviation world. You know, when I tell people that I'm a lawyer, they normally recoil in horror or nod off to sleep. But when I tell them I work with aircraft, their eyes light up, and they become much more engaged with me. And yet, when BACA recently conducted its survey to its membership as to what they thought the key issues faced by the market were, this issue was raised quite widely. So how does a panel think we engage our next generation to ensure that the very best candidates understand what a career in air charter might involve and are enthused to take it up? So I'm going to start with Chris.
It's training, and more training. That's all there is to it.
But how do you get them to the point where you're training them and making sure that the right people have turned up at your door and are putting themselves through your training program?
I'm not going to tell you lot.
Right, you are. That's going to go well. Paul.
Yes.
How do we enthuse the next generation? Not enthusing them terribly well on the answers so far, I'm suspecting, but yeah.
Well, the next generation is definitely moving towards more of the sharing on-demand economy. Just in California, Northern California in particular, people are owning less cars, they're owning less homes. They do everything online nowadays. And so, you know, they're just technology fanatics. So I think the younger generation, you know, if you don't have a way to interact with an industry and a major product in some sort of a form of an online format, they're kind of like, what the heck is wrong with you? So I definitely think, you know, the adoption of technology by this industry and making this a very seamless process where I know exactly when my plane is landing to pick me up and I can see it from the sky and I can change my flight and they recognize and I can change the time and I can book and pay for it online. Those are all very important things to adopting it to that next generation of traveler.
And is it true, and maybe Adam, the younger generations tend to be much more willing to question why things have always been done the way they are, and therefore can be quite creative and help businesses to advance?
Yeah, where are the young generation now? I mean, it would be great if we engaged with high school students so that when they're picking their subjects at secondary school, they were picking the subjects to be a charter broker. That's maybe unrealistic at the moment. So the low-hanging fruit is the university courses, and in particular, aviation management courses. These courses, certainly here in the UK, aren't teaching about business aviation. They're teaching about scheduled airlines, about low-cost travel, but they're not talking about our sector, and it'd be great to have much more of a relationship with those universities. I know, you know, in the States, in Brer-Riddle, they do modules on private aviation. We need to make sure that universities with these aviation management courses in Europe are in touch with us.
Thank you. Wagas?
I agree with Adam, that's true. I think there has to be more training facilities to be there. And business aviation generally is a very cool industry. I believe everybody would love to join in. And, but it's very difficult to join somehow, I feel. It's very easy to join a commercial airline, and they're very aggressive in recruitment. And in business aviation, I don't see that aggressiveness in recruitment. That's what I see.
Mark, do you want to add anything to that?
Yeah, I mean, I agree with everything everyone said here, apart from I'd say it's got to be something to do with the brand, fun place to work, and training. And, you know, you've got to look at where you're going to go and find the people and accept the fact that millennials today, loyalty is going to be few and far between. They'll keep moving on.
Okay, thank you. Right, we're drawing to a close. I'm just going to quickly deal with, so there's a question here, do you vet your customers? Oh, it's gone. That's good timing, isn't it? It's asking about vetting your customers for US export control. I suppose the answer to that is, here we go, it's a bit broader, which is, so Wagas, I'll come back to you again. what do you do to make sure that you know who is flying on your aircraft?
Okay, for mine. I mean, we operate like an airline. An airline also doesn't do such a deep check on who is flying on the aircraft. The security control is done at the airport itself, and we don't do that like a pre-approved man or something. We don't do that from our end at the moment.
In the United States, we actually have regulations around this. We have to check every passenger against the no-fly list, and we do that automatically. So even as the passenger's logging in, that types in their date, we know immediately whether they're on a no-fly list or not.
Yeah, I mean, as a lawyer, we spend quite a lot of time advising clients on sanctions and the various rules that apply in different states, and we always say, look, it doesn't really matter you know, what it might say in particular countries, but you need to make sure you don't fall foul of the US regulations. And if you do, then never go back there on holiday. Chris, do you want to add anything to that?
Well, it's the US no-fly, but you've got UN sanctions, you've got the American no-fly list. We even apply that to our Russian offices who, in all innocence, book holidays for people who are on the American no-fly list, and we refuse to book them, you know, obviously. But there's UN sanctions, EU sanctions, UN sanctions, EU, UN, and American. We've got full-time compliance lawyer now, sadly, and with an assistant. And we've built some connections to APIs for a World Check type. We've moved on from World Check, but World Check type organisation to make sure that the customers and the passengers are compliant. And that's completely in addition to checking aviation regulatory compliance. And I think really, if you're going to scale, which is, you started this business with the first question, is the difficulties of scale. And that's one of the hurdles we found, developing decent compliance regulation, compliance procedures. We've even, for the aviation safety, all our traders have a compliance app on their phone to check the aviation side of it. And it's just part of life today.
Okay, thank you. We're 32 seconds over time. So it just remains to say thank you very much to our panel, and we'll see you all in the bar later.
Thank you.